everyone. Moving on with the Beatles project. Today I'm exploring and enjoying the third song on Sgt. Pepper's, that is Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And when I did my first listen, which you'll hear in just a moment, you'll notice that it really stood out to me in, let's say, a vivid way. Now I'll play my first listen for you. Of course, on YouTube, we can't play the music. And then I will read. So, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. The genre is psychedelic pop. Unsurprisingly, isn't it? Rubber Soul was the pot album and Revolver was the acid. The drugs are to prevent the rest of the world from crowding in on you. She Said was written after an acid trip in LA during a break in the Beatles tour. Dr. Robert was mainly about drugs and pills. It was about myself. I was the one that carried all the pills on tour and always have done. Leary was the one saying, "Take it, take it, take it." And we followed his instructions in his How to Take a Trip book. I did it just like he said in the book, and then I wrote Tomorrow Never Knows, which was almost the first acid song. Now, is Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds a song about or dedicated to LSD? Well, I've read in many of your comments along this Beatles journey that Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is kind of known as a song inspired by LSD, the initials LSD, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. "This is the truth," stated John. "My son came home and showed me this drawing of a strange-looking woman flying around, and I said, 'What is it?' And he said, 'It was Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.' I said, 'Oh, that's beautiful.' And I immediately wrote a song about it." Lucy, Julian's classmate, explained in a BBC radio interview in 2007 her recollections about the drawing and an example of what menaces they were back then. "I remember Julian and I both doing pictures on a double-sided easel, throwing paint at each other, much to the horror of the classroom attendant. Julian had painted a picture, and on that particular day, his father turned up with a chauffeur to pick him up from school." Well, that's an interesting bit of background. I feel like, having listened to the song once in my life, to me, the references to drug-induced experiences were so blatant, in spite of the fact that I've never taken those kinds of drugs. So it just stands out. I think it's hard to argue that it has no connection to their use of drugs at the time. However, it's interesting to see how the whole idea started. And I guess I feel like it's kind of typical of the Beatles to not only play with words, but play with meanings and play around with never allowing something to settle too strongly one side or the other. So this one, everyone says, "Oh, it's about drugs, it's about drugs, it's about LSD." And so John comes along and says, "Well, actually, it was inspired by a drawing my son brought home from school." Probably a bit of each. At least, that's how I feel about it, having just listened to it once. This one's one of the best songs ever written. This 1974 quote from Elton John typifies the allure and mystique that Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds had on the public at large when it was released and for many years thereafter. Well, it is quite a piece of music. So let's listen to it again, and I have the score here. We'll explore it and see what all we can enjoy about it this time through. Okay, I remember this opening. It has such an interesting tonal quality. And actually, I did a little bit of research on my own before I sat down to do this second listen. I was curious about the instruments being used, and so I looked up exactly what instruments were used, and I was a bit surprised to discover that this opening was played on an organ, sort of Hammond organ type, with a certain stop that was supposed to make it sound like a cellist. And that was interesting to me. It almost sounds like it could be, well, I won't say that it sounds like harpsichord, but it has that same sort of brassy, bright, harpsichordy like quality. And I could easily imagine playing this on the harpsichord, and it would work pretty well. But anyway, that's what I noticed. And there's a couple other instruments showing up, which we'll get to eventually. But I want to talk, since we're right at the introduction, let's go ahead and talk about this opening right away, because it is such a rich and colorful and at the same time incredibly, I almost feel like saying minimalistic in a way. There's something about it that is both, well, let's just dive in. So, what do we have? Let's go to the piano, actually. Right. So, this opening, this introduction, let's just listen to it in a bit of a slow motion. Isn't it great how it has a little bit of chromatic element and it starts out feeling pretty standard. Okay, that's solid. That's A. Then we have this. Oh, it gets a little bit dissonant. Oh, wow. We're starting to step down. Okay, the pattern starts to become evident. And then, ooh, that really catches us. And then this, rather than being here, is here. It has to my ears, it has this strange mixture of something that makes me think of, I don't know, let's say a French Impressionist composer type, but at the same time, it feels far too minimalist for something like that. It feels more like something neoclassical, where it has this clean, bright, a little bit edgy, dissonant quality to it, and yet it's so formally secure. I mean, if we start going through this and playing it, we can start hearing a sort of a underlying melodic shape coming out. Just listen for that. Listen. And so right away, we're set up with this really resonant and bright edginess, compact within an octave, kind of creating a framework for the entire piece of music. And it's almost like I'm hearing yeah, it could be Prokofiev or even, some other really 20th century neoclassical, clean, sparse, spare, classical piece of music. Anyway, that's what I wanted to point out with this right away, because I remember from my first listen that this became a feature throughout. And so it really has a lot to contribute. And let's keep our ears open for that as we continue listening. So since that was just the introduction, let's just go back and start from the beginning now with our ears kind of tuned to that, and we'll continue from there. Hear it now, right? It really stands out. In fact, I'll go ahead and mark so that we can have this visually as well. What I'm singing as the sort of hidden melodic line is simply the first note of each bar in this organ part. Da, 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 da. And it's interesting to notice then when the voice comes in. That's also the moment when the bass comes in. And I was just now noticing that the bass is also simply striking one note per beat in this opening. It kind of follows the same shape, not quite. This is an A, well, this is an E. All right, so for those of you who are all into musical, technical stuff, those are the facts of the matter. Then they join forces and they're both on G together. Then we move on. They're both on F sharp together. There's the bass, and then they both strike the F natural together. So there is a bit of unison element going on here. Oh, yes, and actually, when this comes in, they're both on E together. So it's really just the first note here that is not in octave or unison. So it's right to think of that hidden melody as something important and significant. And then when the bass comes in, sure enough, he's outlining that exact shape, which then pulls it down to make it a bass line. Really cool. Okay. Here we're hearing it as part of these arpeggios. Wait, I also like the way when the bass comes in here on these sustained notes. Dum bum 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 bum. It's kind of acting like the drums do sometimes in adding repetitions and shape to a place which would otherwise be quite static. So it becomes a sort of movement that keeps the music progressing. And we hear this bum, 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 which is really kind of a bass type outline, isn't it? Okay. Now, I know this is getting kind of detailed, but this piece is... No, let's just go on because we'll come back to the same melody, won't we? Okay. Let's go What a change. What a change. I mean, the sonority of the entire thing changes. The key changes. And let's see. Yeah, right here. This is the big section change. And this is a moment where I feel like saying, there is something about it that makes me cross-reference with Kabalevsky. Because Kabalevsky loved to make these sudden shifts, kind of pivots in his music. And this kind of does that in this moment. And so I feel some commonality there, which is fun to notice for me as a classical musician. I'm not saying that they are inspired by Kabalevsky, but it's interesting to notice the similarities, isn't it? Okay, so let's back up and hear this transition and really notice what's happening here. Let's go by. We're not getting there yet. So we have the bass, the drums, the voice, kind of even, all bum 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 bum. I love the way the bass is the glue that joins these two sections. We hear ba da da dee da da dee da ba, and that is what links us, that walking down between the two sections, and I like that a lot. Now, so far, it's just a voice and these few spare... Oh, I forgot to mention this other instrument, which I also looked up just to make sure I was right about it. And it is an instrument called the tambura, which is not a tambourine. It is an Indian... It's part of a family of Asian Eastern European instruments, all with sort of tambour, something. But tambura, it's a long neck and a little resonating box, kind of like a lute, but the box is much smaller than a lute, and it has these wire strings. And the thing that I find interesting about it is that it's typically not fingered on the neck like, say, guitar or violin. It's mainly open string plucking, resonating. So it's more of a drone type instrument. But this is the section of music where it starts to put its foot forward and make us hear its voice a bit. And I like what it does. This entire piece of music is so fanciful, so fantastic. Picture yourself in a boat on a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies. It's as if, I guess I said on my first listen, it's as if I am biting into a tangerine, fresh picked off the tree, and I don't even bother to peel the skin. So it's full of the freshest citrus oils, and the flavor is just so intense, and it explodes in my mouth, and I can hardly stand it. It's so bright and fresh. At the same time, I absolutely love it. And it's the music and it's the lyrics. Tangerine trees and marmalade skies. Somebody calls you. You answer quite slowly. A girl with kaleidoscope eyes. Who would think of that? And
John Lennon.
Yeah, okay, well, oh, there you go. It gets better as it goes, doesn't it? But I think it's just great the way all of this comes. Now, before we go too far, let's talk about this melody a bit. Because all of this that I'm talking about, such intensity in flavor and experience, listening to it, the brilliance of it, the vividness of it, the saturation levels so strong. All of that with a melody that when we start to look at it might surprise you. So for this, I think we'll just take the piano and go back to the opening line, since it's quite strophic. It's verse and bridge and chorus, whatever. So we are basically working off of an A chord, more or less. And this is the middle note of the A chord. So we have A, B, C sharp. All right. Now, if I simply play each note when the note changes, picture yourself in a boat on a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies. Okay, now listen. If I straighten out all the rhythms, it's almost like someone said, look, take the first three notes, take the three notes of, say, hot cross buns. And make a song that's a masterpiece out of those three notes. You have permission to throw in a couple others here and there, but basically the whole piece is built around those three notes melodically for the entire verse. The next phrase, a little variant. Instead of somebody calls you, as we had at first, it takes a little meandering trip upwards. Somebody, just to break the line a little bit, but suddenly we're back. Oh yes, and the other surprise, which actually just caught me here, because this is only my second time listening to the piece, and I'm reading the score and all of this. Let's listen to the repetitions. Did I count it right? Let's see here. Let's go ahead and mark it. First group of 3. Second group of 3. Third group of 3. Fourth group of 3. Fifth group of 3. And then the little flourish at the end. 5 groups. And here's the surprise at the end here. So we have this na da da, which we won't count. Then we have this group of 3, second group of 3, third group of 3, fourth group of 3. There is no fifth group of 3. And you saw me just now. I was 5. And I started to go this way and suddenly caught myself. Oh my goodness, we're already here. And that is brilliant in such a simple way, because it's as if it sets our expectations and suddenly it cuts our expectations short by taking us on that little flourish one bar sooner, and it keeps the entire thing from feeling square and settled. So basically we have a song that they've written using the same 3 notes as hot cross buns for the most part in the verse. And instead we end up with this wonderfully intense musical experience. And all of that built around those 3 notes. And this thing. Right? Okay, let's continue. Well, and one of the things that I feel like is such an important part of making this work, it's not just the music, which the music is great, but as I said, the lyrics also add so much to the entire experience of this piece. This is a piece where even if you're not following in a way that you're trying to make sense of the lyrics, you hear tangerine, marmalade, you answer quite slowly, and it's kind of drawn out there, almost warped it feels like the speed has been, kind of played with a bit. It's like the tape runs a bit slowly there. A girl with kaleidoscope eyes, and all of this comes floating through your consciousness, even if you're not really paying attention to what the lyrics are saying. And it's part of the musical experience of the piece. I'm going to say that because not only are these words part of the story of the lyrics, but it's really quite a story, but it has to do with the musical quality, tangerine, and what we associate with that. Marmalade, kaleidoscope, cellophane, yellow and green, towering over. It becomes part of the whole swirling together of sensory experience that is this piece of music. And that's really fascinating to notice, and it explains why the melody had to be so simple. Because if you were to create a complex melody that runs all over the place or does all sorts of complicated things, it would detract from this multisensory, fantastic, imaginary experience that is this piece of music. Right. Okay. So, what about this section here? What just happened? Well, not only did we change keys again, right on cue at the bar line, double bar line, we also changed meter. And that's one of the things that is so... Well, when you listen to those solo drum beats, pound, 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 something feels slightly off there, doesn't it? It's as if the whole piece has been interrupted, and you suddenly hear someone pounding posts outside or something. It's that invasive. It's that much of an interruption, a halting of the mood and the feel that has been created. I don't mean it feels off in a bad way. What it is, if I can get rid of these markings here for a second, We've been in 3-time. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And even here, oh, speaking of minimalism, you know, I was talking about 3 notes. Well, this second section is basically 1 note all the way. Cellophane flowers of yellow and green towering over your head. And then that's the first little bit of kind of pitch change, still following da-da-dum shape, right? All right, back to this idea of meter change. So we're stuck on this note. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. And then suddenly, here comes Ringo. Pound, pound, pound. Hold on. We just got done singing this. We landed on this gone note. In fact, where is this? Isn't it interesting? He was singing head, and we arrived on this note without a new syllable. Head. It's just the ending of a, it's like we're falling down. But then when we get to here, the back and you're gone, suddenly gone it arrives on that final note. And that's a rather important thing to notice because it plays into this whole transition and this shift of what's going on right here. You see, gone is the downbeat. That is where we arrive. Back and or turn your eyes and she's gone. And then the drum beats come. How many are there? 1, 2, 3. But wait a minute. We just had the downbeat. Those came after the downbeat. So if we were keeping the pulse of 3 going, there would only be 2. Bum, ba, da, dum, 2, 3. It would come on beat 3. Gone, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So those are the 3 beats, but the drums would only come on the final 2 beats of the bar. But instead, it's kind of messing with us here. That's why I say it feels a bit off. We hear the downbeat, and then we hear somebody counting 1, 2, 3. Well, it all adds up to 4. That's the trick. Because he's setting up what's going to happen right on this bar line, which is that we end up with 4 beats in a bar for this whole next section. Lucy in the sky with diamonds. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, this is now the way the bass is coming up, saying bum 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 bum. It's almost like a tuba in a marching band. Bum 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 bum. 1, 2, 1, 2. Well, this is in 4, but anyway, it's close enough, right? And it gives such a burst of energy and momentum and strength and power in this song that would otherwise feel a little bit too lackadaisical, too much just shall I say enervated. There's just, there wouldn't be enough there. This passage, this section, is just the right balance to set it all off. And it has to do partly with the key change, but a lot with the tempo. And I have to say, I keep saying, I am really enjoying the bass in this piece. When this section comes in, dum bum 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 diddy dee diddy dee diddy dee diddy dum bum bum. This bump diddy dee diddy dee diddy dee. It just struck me that is something that features in Pink Floyd's "Run Like Hell" or something like that. Bump diddy dee diddy dee diddy dee diddy dee. Well, here it's not quite so manipulated in the studio, so it's a cleaner sound, but it's that same rhythm, isn't it? It's sort of a galloping rhythm. Bump diddy dee 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 diddy. Is it "Run Like Hell" that it's in, or is it okay? Not the volume knob, not the volume knob, but the speed knob. It's as if somebody just was sitting there with the tape and controlling the speed. And when they get to the end of this, they turn it to, let's say, -2. It's not quite slow motion. It's not like we're watching something happen in slow motion, but everything is just turned down a little bit, enough that we really notice and feel it. And then Ringo is the one that comes and says, "Hold on, guys, pick it up. What are you doing? Let's get back to business. Aw, turn it down." Well, I feel like saying that kind of goes along with John Lennon's enjoyment of staying in bed late in the mornings. Maybe he just didn't feel like being too energetic, so he's like, "Let's take it easy, da 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 da." And Ringo says, "Come on, guys, let's get moving."
Picture yourself on a train in a station.
It's one of those pieces you almost feel like, it's so good, we could hear it over again. Why didn't they make it twice as long? There's something incredibly childlike about this piece, even though I could say it's so mature, it's so, in a way, sophisticated. It feels like, as I said, someone gave the hot cross buns to a master composer and said, "Here, do something with this that would be memorable for generations." And Lennon and McCartney said, "Right, we're up to the task. Just hold my beer. Be right back." And it is incredibly formally solid. It has great design, structurally, shape-wise, pacing, the transitions, the different contrasting sections, the great key shifts throughout in those sections. It's really great in all of those ways, and that is why I say it feels so mature, so competent, so legendary. And at the same time, especially when we start looking at the lyrics, it feels so much like, in a way, Yellow Submarine. Or even, if I were to jump to a different band that came later, Queen's Seven Seas of Rhye. This game of fanciful imagination. Follow her down to a bridge by a fountain. Have you ever listened to a child tell stories? You know, a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, with a few little toys or sticks and just waxing eloquent in the most amazing ways. And you sit there and you think, man, why can't I do this? Where rocking horse people eat marshmallow pies. Everyone smiles as you drift past the flowers that grow so the detail that grows so incredibly high. I love this line. Newspaper taxis appear on the shore. Newspaper taxis. What on earth is that? Taxis made out of newspaper? That's what comes into my mind. These little paper cars, maybe origami type cars, with newsprint all over it. It's just so, it feels like a treasure in that regard. This childlike exploring and investing in the imagination. Well, I know that, of course, their use of drugs and substances was one of the things that helped free them up and break down their inhibitions to come up with this stuff. But it really is great. Plasticine porters with looking glass ties. Looking glass ties. Imagine looking glass ties. You look at somebody, they're wearing a tie that is a mirror and you see your face in it. I mean, have you ever really thought about that line there? With looking glass ties. And of course, here shows up the girl again with kaleidoscope eyes. It is great, and I love it from so many different angles. And it's one of those pieces that I guess I'll enjoy for the foreseeable future. So that is Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, my kind of exploration, second listen, having fun with the piece. I will be back soon with the next one on the album, which I've already done my first listen. So you can keep your eyes peeled for that, and I'll see you soon.